Well, everyone, welcome. My name is Kate DeConnick, if we haven't met before. I teach in the Department of Theology and Religious Studies at USD, and along with Dr. Mike Williams, who is also one of the co-directors of the Urgent Challenges Collective, we are happy to welcome you to this event today. We have a whole bunch of co-sponsors for today's event, including the School of Nursing, and also including the Just Read program here at USD. And this is actually the last event in the Urgent Challenges Collective's fall speaker series as well. So the collective is our initiative on campus that supports research, teaching, and advocacy and community engagement that has to do with homelessness. And so this group of co-sponsors came together today to plan this wonderful event to get to talk about youth, homelessness, and health and its various implications and kind of intersections in our community. So we're really thrilled to see the turnout for today's event. As just a small disclaimer, we just want to remind the audience that we can't cover every single fact or detail or element of these topics just in our short conversation today, but there are some really excellent resources available on the Urgent Challenges Collective's website, which we'll put in the chat for you in a few minutes if you want to look more into some of the topics that we're learning about today. We also wanted to acknowledge the diversity of our audience members today. So we have students, we have undergraduate students, graduate students, faculty members, staff, community members, people who have lived experience with homelessness or housing insecurity themselves are here with us today as well. And so we just want to kind of acknowledge who's in the room in that way as well. So in just a second, I'm going to turn the mic over to Dr. Mike Williams and Dr. Mary Barger, who are going to provide some general background information to kind of set the stage for our panelists, just to get everybody on the same page a little bit. And before I do that, I just wanted to share a couple of Zoom etiquette and kind of navigation reminders with our audience too. So since we're going to have a pretty large audience for today, we would ask that you please remember to keep your audio muted, especially when our presenters are talking, just to avoid any distracting sounds or background noise or things like that. We would also ask that during the initial presentations, we're going to have our three panelists and a little bit of framing before that. If you could please keep your video off, at least just during that part of today's event, that would be very helpful just to prevent our videos from lagging on Zoom. So when we get to the Q&A portion, and we will have a good chunk of time for Q&A, you're welcome to turn on your videos and interface kind of more directly. But for the time being, if you're able to turn off your camera, that would be great. Okay, so like I said, after our presenters finish their initial presentations, we will have time for questions and answers. So we're going to do Q&A for the whole group kind of together. And if you have a question that you would like to ask any of our presenters or all of them, we would invite you to submit it using a shared Google Doc link that we're going to put in the chat area in just a second here. So the way that it works is you just navigate to the bottom of your Zoom screen, you open up the chat area. And once you get to the chat, I'm going to put this in the chat area right now for you. You should be able to open up this Google Doc and just type any questions that you have right into that Google Doc. And this makes it easier for us to moderate during the Q&A portion. So if somebody asks a question that you are also interested in, you can just put a little asterisk next to that question for us, and we will know that it's of interest to multiple people. Okay, so you have the link to the Google Doc. We will share that a few times kind of over the course of our presentations today. In case you get kicked out and you have to join or anything like that, don't worry, we'll keep sharing the doc with you. Okay, so I'm going to turn things over to Mike Williams first, my co-director at the Urgent Challenges, and he's going to do a little bit of framing to kick things off for our event today. And Mike, I'm going to pull the slides up for you.
Great. Thank you, Dr. DeConnick. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight for this discussion of this very important and timely issue for our community. We estimate that nationwide there are about 4.2 million youth who are homeless each night. Here in our own San Diego community, we estimate that there's about 1,500 youth who experience homelessness. And Kate, you can switch over the slide. And what you're seeing here is every year in San Diego, we do a point in time count, and we have a separate point in time count just for youth. And we interview as many youth as possible to find out more of their personal stories. And what you can see here with the youth living in San Diego represents what we find nationwide. And in terms of the percentage that are attending school, the percentage that have been homeless for a year or longer, and the percentage who have reported exchanging sexual acts as a commodity. in addition to those who've been in prison or jail who have reported a mental issue. What we find here in San Diego is consistent with what we find nationwide. I do want to just focus on two subpopulations of our youth, and you can go to the next slide, Kate, that are dramatically disproportionately affected by youth homelessness. And the first is our LGBTQ plus youth. They are more than twice as likely to become homeless, and they are more than twice as likely to face trauma while living on the streets and to die an early death. In addition, our Black population in San Diego is disproportionately affected by being homeless. Our Black population in San Diego is estimated to be about 6%. And you can see from this slide that the unaccompanied youth in San Diego who identify as Black or African American represent 24% of the youth who are experiencing homelessness. And we find this with the adult population as well. And then finally, when we think about the intersectionality of these groups, for our Black LGBTQ plus youth are the most disproportionately affected of all the youth in San Diego and nationwide. So as we think through this issue, I would just have us keep in mind not only the issue of youth homelessness, but the intersectionality of this issue. And in addition, finally, the city of San Diego has a city action plan to address homelessness over the last 10 years. And one of their most ambitious goals is to completely eradicate youth homelessness within 3 years. So this discussion we're having tonight is really timely and extremely relevant because it's something that's on the mind of our city and county leaders to address right away. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Dr. Mary Barger.
Thank you, Mike. I think everyone is just clearly aware if you're living on the street, it's definitely going to affect your health. And that over half the population on the street, living on the street, report one of these 4 problems with their health, either have a chronic health condition, a mental health condition, physical health condition, or substance use. So that's true of everyone on the street, and I would say at least the last 3 are true of the youth who are living on the street. And on the next slide, I'm going to go into a little bit more detail of those 3. So mental health. So for youth living on the street, up to almost a half of them suffer from depression, and 1 in 4 or more from self-injury. And many of them also suffer from PTSD. Compared to their peers who are housed, youth who are homeless are 2 times at risk for actually committing suicide, as well as twice the risk of attempting suicide. And as Dr. Williams pointed out, if you identify as LGBTQ plus, your risk is even 2 times higher than that of the people who are just homeless. So that community is particularly at risk for these mental health issues. And then the use of substance use is quite high. Many youth survive by exchanging sex for goods, as Dr. Williams pointed out. And so, of course, when you exchange sex for goods, you're typically not practicing safe sex. So youth are really at risk for infections that have long-term consequences on their health. So if you develop hepatitis B or C, your risk of developing liver cancer increases quite dramatically with both those 2 infections, let alone just the immediate consequences of having hepatitis. HIV obviously is a chronic health condition these days if you can take your meds and are staying on it. And then if you are a female and you have pelvic inflammatory disease and you get PID 2 or 3 times, that increases your risk of infertility about 7 to 10 times those people who don't have PID. And then there's tuberculosis, which is spread just being on the streets, not necessarily limited to the youth. And then I want to point out the issues related to education, which were on one of Dr. Williams' slides, but one of the highest things that are correlated with your long-term health is your educational attainment. So youth who are on the street are having a very difficult time staying in school, performing well in school. So many of them don't graduate from high school or get a GED, and 75% of them are perform below grade level in one study. So the combination of being homeless and trying to stay in school is a huge issue. And we know it not even just youth, but we know in our community colleges that many youth are nearly homeless. They're living in their cars, or they're couch surfing, or they're doing other things, and they're still trying to get their associate's arts degree. So there are obviously long-term and short-term consequences of living on the street. And I'll turn it over to the next speaker, Kate.
Great. We're actually going to pause our slides sharing for a moment here because our first speaker for tonight isn't using any slides, which is great. Mike, I think you were going to introduce Nyla, who's our first speaker of the evening. Did you want to just say a word and then we'll turn it over to Nyla?
Sure. I'm really honored to introduce Nyla to this conversation. She's a recent graduate of the University of San Diego, and she has been not only active on campus in terms of advocating for youth experiencing homelessness, but she's been super active in the community. She's on what I believe Nyla is called the Youth Action Board, working on issues of homelessness in the community. She was one of the first people I met on campus when I was trying to discover who on campus was working on this. And it's such an honor to have you with us tonight.
Thank you, Mike. I really appreciate it. I just want to say hi, I'm Nyla. It's very nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me. I just wanted to start off by saying thank you to everyone who's here and who is wanting to be educated about homelessness, especially with those who have personal experience, such as myself, and who is working closely with homelessness. Just thank you so much for wanting to know more about how we can help our community here. I want to start off by saying that one thing about homelessness is that it looks different for others. Not everyone has the same story. And what people usually think about homelessness is that it's those who are sleeping on the sidewalk, those who are so dirty and just so crazy, and the ones that are sleeping on the bus stops. And they're the type of people that you don't want to interact with. And it's not. That's actually called chronic homelessness. There's actually different levels of homelessness that a lot of people don't really understand that is out there for us. And it can look like sleeping in someone's car or sleeping on someone's couch, not having a stable home or even a place to call home. So my experience of homelessness started when I was actually younger. I was about 9 to 13. And I was living with my biological mom. There was not a lot of stability in a place where we can actually call home growing up when I was with her. And this was actually before I knew that she was heavily using meth. And I didn't understand why she couldn't pay our rent on time, why there were days that we only ate once a day, and we were forced to sleep in someone else's car in the parking lot. And sometimes we were able to get a motel room, but somehow we would be forced to always sleep in homes that were abandoned and we found out that the families were on vacations or something, so we would break in. And after that, we started squatting in abandoned homes. We also started to, after we got caught by police and stuff several times, we started sleeping in storage rooms. And when I mean that, I mean like the A1 storage units. We would just break into those and we would sleep on the floor or whatever we had. And the last placement I remember being with my biological mom was that we were actually in a very dangerous motel. It was full of people who were unstable, who were also heavily using drugs. It wasn't a place fit for 4 little girls. And my mom would constantly leave us abandoned there for several days without any food. And I used to think that this experience of homelessness never affected me. It had no type of effect on how I process my emotions, how I see myself and my worth as I got older. And the problem is that it did, because my mom was heavily using drugs. She wasn't paying attention to me and my younger siblings. She was constantly abusing us, and she was also neglecting us and abandoning us in very dangerous places that you can't imagine. But it didn't really click to me that all of this was affecting me on some subconscious level until I came to USD. And I realized that I was reliving my housing and food insecurity through my first couple of years in college. And the problem is that I was experiencing depression. I was experiencing suicidal attempts multiple times throughout my college career. And I was back on this survival mode that a lot of people don't realize. When your fight or flight response is activated all the time and there's no, I guess, like recovery period, your body doesn't know how to regulate these emotions where you're like, okay, no, I'm okay, everything's safe. Now you're just constantly on the survival mode where you're just thinking like, okay, where am I going to be at next? What food am I going to eat next? And that's kind of what I experienced at USD. I didn't have a lot of money, even though I did enter the foster system after being taken away from my mom. I didn't have a lot of money because all of my money went straight to my tuition, and I would eat what I can, what I could afford from like Aromas or something, and I would wait for the dinner haul. But a lot of people are saying like, oh, that's just the college experience, but it wasn't by choice for me. So the thing is that that stress overload that continued to build up over time, and I continue to suppress those emotions because I truly believe that it wasn't affecting me in any way, shape, or form. I realized that I became very protective of my living situation, and I started fighting with roommates. I started fighting with friends that I deeply regret because I was in such a very high stress mode. And I realized that now I was projecting my anger from what I was experiencing back then to now. And it's not an excuse, but it is my reason. And it wasn't until I became stable in my housing, even after being kicked out of housing from my own family members, that it was, okay, this is what happened. This is what I went through. It wasn't okay, but I'm okay now. A lot of people don't get to have that chance where you can have stable housing, where you can have someone to reach out to and talk about what has happened before. And there's a very big connection with kids who had experienced homelessness at least one time before in their life, will experience homelessness later on in life, and that can lead to chronic homelessness. So, you know, thinking that I'm never going to get through this did take a toll of me and my mental health, because I didn't have control of my home or food situation. I felt worthless. I felt like I didn't deserve the basic needs that everyone else has, a family that cares about them and makes sure that they have a home for them and stuff. And it just kind of seems like a never ending cycle for you. But I'm here to talk about my story just so you can understand that it's not always a choice to be homelessness. It's not something that we choose. Sometimes it's just what happens in our society. And there's a lot of mental health things that we don't give to people, and we don't let people talk about a lot of the time. Luckily, I am one of the ones that didn't get stuck in the substance abuse format, but a lot of my peers are. And my heart always pours out for them. And that's why I'm here talking about my story, to make sure that you guys understand that there's a lot more in place when it comes to homelessness. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nyla. Your honesty and your sharing with us today really sets the stage for such a meaningful conversation. And thank you just for being present and being open with all of us. I'm going to turn things over to Martha Fuller from the School of Nursing, and she's going to introduce our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. I am a faculty in the School of Nursing in the Nurse Practitioner Program, and I'm delighted to introduce one of our alums. This is Dr. Serena Arts, who is a family nurse practitioner, an adult nurse practitioner, and also a certified wound care nurse. She was an experienced nurse practitioner caring for adults, has a heart for service, and wanted to do her family nurse practitioner so she could care for all ages. She didn't put this in her bio, but I will share with you that she has worked abroad and done mission service there. She has worked in multiple different clinical roles, including taking care of patients with gastrointestinal problems, cardiac problems, and wound care. And she is now working as a primary care provider for Father Joe's Village in San Diego, which includes providing street health or street medicine to the downtown community twice weekly. Serena, take it away.
And
Can you hear me
Serena,
now?
yeah, you were muted, but you're good now.
It's my fault. I'm sorry. Yeah, I do work for Father Joe's as a nurse practitioner, and I'm proudly affiliated with USD. And so next slide, please. So the creed is there for Father Joe's, and basically we treat everybody as a neighbor. So that kind of takes everybody into more of a family type of role. We end homelessness one life at a time. And a key factor is treating people or meeting them where they're at, and then you can move them forward. And next slide. So we provide wraparound services that includes the street health that we do 3 days a week. But since March, with the pandemic, we've been moved to the convention center, and we serve for primary care there for 3 Alpha Project, Father Joe's, and the Veterans Village shelters. But then we continue with that primary care 5 days a week. And we have dental, behavioral health, mental health, provide 3 meals a day to the community, basic services like showers, laundries, haircuts, addresses, array of housing, as you can see, that goes with case management and navigation, and religious services, and of course, childcare, and a big thing of education and employment services. And next slide. And so we are funded from the top down. Feds give us HUD money, state and county grants, private donations, and then we also have some fundraising efforts of our own. And next slide. And so street health is actually now a subspecialty or a specialty in its own, and it has its own level of care from the traditional ways that we have been providing medical care. So it's not really these mobile health clinics, which are beautiful and great and very, very serving in the community, but mostly for events in certain populations. And then the outreach workers too, they are working on their own, and it's something that, you know, they're not doing a good job, but they don't provide a lot of the wraparound services and resources and kind of work in a silo, and they're inconsistent in providing care. So the street health, we deliver to them. We can go out to their encampments on the streets in certain areas, and we're consistent. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, Friday at this time, and we have many resources and services. A big part of it is building relationships and gaining trust. It matters a lot for the homeless people. And we try to identify like a champion or a liaison in certain areas in the, that we go to in a route, so to speak. So we can disseminate information through them, and they can also tell us things like they'll say, oh, the guy in the tent behind that bush, he needs your help, go help him. So that's really helpful. And then it reduces barriers to getting any care. And harm reduction. So an example of harm reduction would be they're injecting heroin, but they are not at the point or ready to quit injecting heroin. So we try to get them to do it in a safer manner so that they can maintain better health for their long-term life. And then when they get to a point where they're ready, then we can be available for them there too. And next slide. So obviously nobody plans to be homeless. Something obviously has happened to you. You don't grow up to be a prostitute. You don't want to grow up to be a drug user. So Father Joe's was the first consistent street health program in San Diego. And I've been blessed to be there a year now. I took over a 5-month-old program from my predecessor there, Kristen. We serve the downtown and the East Village area. We have to maintain the care in our zip code according to our grants limits. My personal goal is to see about 4 people each, billable visits each time we go out. We may have 20 encounters on that day, but if I can get 12 billable visits, I feel I can be more sustainable that way. And our aim is to see people at the van as we have here. This is called Betty Ford. So Kristen's, you know, you can be more ergonomically and more private, and our supplies are in that cabinet back there, that white cabinet. So we have more supplies and more varied supplies. We still go to put stuff in our backpacks and go out into the terrain, but we don't have as much with us. And we do like to transition them into the clinic. We can do meds and imaging orders and referrals, but we can't draw blood or get UAs, which is that would solve a lot of problems. So that's a goal to get them into the clinic. And next slide. So here it is. We don't have our backpacks on here, but we're out here for Christmas, just handing out little packages and gaining relationships with people. And you can see Eddie is in the front, and he's our front man, wingman, and you kind of walk alongside. You don't walk up to people, you walk alongside them, because this is their home, you know, up to that blanket. So you don't want to impose on them. And then we just see them as we can. And then next slide, please. And always asked about the convention center. So here we are at the convention center in section D. We have our exam rooms are those tents. We share it with public health nurses and EMS. The other projects, the other shelters are in the other sections, and they actually come here to see us in this section, which it could be yards away. It's not far. And next slide, please. So this is seeing the patient in the exam room. Okay, and next slide. So the impacts on homelessness and their health is huge. And the younger you are, the more exponentially you are affected. So we see routine things and not so routine. But if we see syphilis, it's going to be a late stage syphilis. Tuberculosis, late stage. Bones that are not healed correctly or just free floating. Wounds, maggots, cellulitis. Yes, we see frostbite. huge infestations like you can imagine, and the poor dental conditions are horrendous. And not only is the bad toothache, but it's a sharp tooth that kind of cuts inside their mouth and under their tongue. And so now they have another infection in their mouth, and it's hard to eat. Addictions of various things that I've been learning, and multiple addictions. And as Nayla has said, the people have a lot of depression, anxiety, PTSD, and maybe underlying other psychosis or depression, bipolar or whatever. And this just exponentiates it and makes it flourish. And with drugs and not eating and not sleeping well, you grow more, you develop more psychological problems. The violence is huge for the teens and young adults because they're easy prey. They're repeatedly raped and gang raped, men and women. The rejection and isolation from society is huge also at this age. This is when you're coming into your own, making relationships and finding out who you are, and you are just shunned. And as mentioned earlier, the illiteracy and developmental delays, that they may have ran away at 16, but they probably didn't do well in school for 2 years before that. And they're probably never an A student. So perhaps they have elementary, junior high education, and that's going to affect them their whole life. And their developmental delays of 16, 17 years old, and they get in their 20s. How do they balance a checkbook? How do they pay, their rent and show up on time for appointments? They have no life experiences and have very unskilled. So this affects everything going forward. And the younger you are, the worse it is. And next slide, please. So these are the things we mostly see. We compiled this in June. As you can see, it's skin and cardiovascular along with musculoskeletal neuro. But I have to tell you that it's not capturing all of the things, because I will see somebody for an abscess, but they also have dental problems and psych problems. But I'm not addressing that at this point because they're only wanting me to take care of this abscess. So my next goal is to include this and capture all these so we can get a better idea of the data of the things that we are seeing. But so there's many things out there. And the next slide. So again, just kind of specific to adolescents and young adults. Again, their situation was bad at home that made them leave for some reason or unaccepted. And it only gets worse from there with the violence and the abuse that they have to endure. A lot, like was said, was the sexual orientation. Sometimes when they tell their parents they're gay, it's kind of tolerated until the young son of theirs starts putting clips in his hair, or the daughter starts strapping down her breasts, and it becomes more expressed. And then that's when they kind of are out. Also, this age group does drug experiments. We experiment with drugs. It turns more into addictions at that time. And then the women have a lot of problems there too. And next slide, please. So I know I've run out of time, so I can tell you some stories at the end, if that's okay. And in the next slide, we can see some things that you can actually access yourself to help. Thank you.
Fabulous, Serena. Thank you so much. Yeah, hopefully, with our remaining time during the Q&A, if folks would like to hear some of the specific stories that you were thinking about in relation today, we can definitely save some time for that as well. Martha, I believe you're going to introduce our next speaker, and then we'll turn it over to our third and final speaker from there.
Yes, our third speaker is Joanne Newgard, who is the program director of the program Doors of Change. And she came to this nonprofit, which works with youth, after 25 years working as the director of client service for an investment advisory firm. So it seems like a completely opposite career. And about 3 years ago, she started volunteering in the music and art program with Doors of Change, which includes outreach. And people were so impressed with her that she was asked to become the program director. And I will say that Joanne has also a special place for the School of Nursing, because she has worked with our students who are becoming nurses, are pre-licensure students, to give them an opportunity to do outreach and learn how to work with homeless youth. Joanne, thank you.
Thank you, Martha, for the introduction. There is a video. I don't know, Kate, if we want to play that now, or if we have time. It's a 3-minute video. Is that okay?
Yeah, let's give it a try. I'll try playing the video. If it doesn't work for some reason, we'll drop it in the chat, but we can use that to start, Joanne. Thank you.
Thank you.
The thing that made me leave home when I was 12 that was so bad was my new stepfather.
Let's see if it wants to buffer for a second here.
He started to abuse me physically, emotionally, mentally, would call me names, drag me by my hair, hit me, kick me. He was basically torturing me.
On the streets is quite difficult, near impossible to trust people really, because they were always looking out for themselves. I had to do the same, look out for myself.
The longest time period I didn't eat for was probably like 3 days.
I was chain smoking cigarettes for warmth. I figured the heat from the smoke, you know, would keep me warm for the night.
I slept in a lot of crazy places. I would sleep like on park benches in parks. I slept on the beach a lot. I eventually had a tent. Well, there was one night I slept in a dumpster on top of a piece of cardboard. Thankfully, it wasn't trash day.
I was able to sleep in front of anybody, no matter what. It was like, hey, if they kill me, they kill me. And, you know, if they would try to rob me, they rob me. It's like, that's just what it was.
I would perform in the streets to get some money. I would just do tricks with a soccer ball.
The toughest thing about being homeless is the loss of hope and trying to hold on to that.
I first heard of Doors of Change through outreach. Jeff was walking around doing outreach.
We're going on outreach, which we've done now for 18 years, twice a week, trying to find homeless kids between the age primarily of 16 to 25. When we find them, we ask them if they'd like to come to a music and arts program. They get free music lessons, free art, free dinners, free food, free clothes, case management, whatever they would like. We've seen now over 7,300 visits now in 6 years.
The staff of Doors of Change are kind. They're always in a great mood. They're always asking to help anyway. It's really nice. It feels like a family.
Doors of Change has helped me because I was homeless at 17 because my biological dad got involved and he punched me in the face repeatedly. And now I'm about to graduate from college, computer engineering. Homeless, degree. Pretty clear line.
It's really important that people that are able to donate to Doors of Change can provide the financial support that we need to continue to provide opportunities for these kids, whether it be music instruments, referrals, life skills, you know, anything that they need help with. They need a lot of support, and even if it's just $5, I mean, really anything can help these kids. And the bigger the donation, the more children are going to end up with opportunities like me that they can make something of themselves and make an impact in this world. And that's why it's so important that we have donors. They really make the whole organization run.
Thank you. Thank you, Kate, for sharing that. I always, I've seen it a billion times and it always kind of touches me. Especially since the program's been closed. As of March, mid-March, because of COVID, we had to close the program and pivot to figure out how we're going to continue to support these youth that need our help so very much. So since the day of the close of the program, we have continued with our outreach on Thursdays and Sundays to be consistent with the days of the program. Consistency of a program is very important especially when you're dealing with lives of homeless youth when most things are so inconsistent. So we have committed to the Thursday, Sunday, and have been doing that for almost 8 years now. So I was fortunate enough to be approached by your nursing students and your nursing team, and I've been so blessed to have the company, this great outreach of students have been accompanying me during outreach these last few months. I hope most of them are on the call right now. I just want to give a big shout out to them. They've been tremendous and supportive, and I've just loved having the company. But what we've done during this time to continue offering services for the homeless youth is we've done a lot of social media. Interesting enough, young people may be without phones or laptops, but somehow they find Facebook. That's their community. So our case managers continuing to have conversations and provide case management virtually through private messaging on Facebook. In addition to that, every Thursday and Sunday, myself and the volunteers will pass out these flyers. We'll leave them out, I should say, in lavatories and laundromats and other places that we anticipate young people would find them. And we have had so many referrals as a result of these flyers, as well as the lunch drops. We have lunch with, and we include quotes that the nurse students come up with, some lovely inspirational quotes, as well as socks and bandanas. The thought with the bandanas, they'll use it as a mask to help them and for some protection. So we have continued with full case management load. We're actually busier than when the program was open because there's such a need. You know, Nyla's story just keeps coming in my head because Nyla's story is the story of many young people that come to our program. Nyla, probably because of who she is, made some wonderful choices. Most of our young people don't make those choices, or or just things don't end up the way they did. And that's who we have. We have young people like Nyla who have just not had the support of parents and have been aged out of foster care, who come to our program because they're basically homeless after they turn 18. And they're not educated. And Nyla sounds tremendously educated and articulate, but most of these young people have learning disabilities, as was just shown in all the slides and all the information, that they suffer greatly educationally and physically. So they're disadvantaged to begin with. And then you couple that with addiction and other unfortunate things that happen when you're on the street. So it's a lot to help these kids. And at the peak of our program, right in Ocean Beach, and we only have the one program, we've had as many as 45 young people come. That's a lot. And there's so many more out there. The schools, you know, the city colleges and SDSU, we just partnered with to collaborate with them to help their homeless and disadvantaged students, because education is a way to break the cycle. So we've just joined forces with SDSU. We have similar flyers that Brianna, I'll give a shout out to Brianna, has designed, which are so wonderful. And we also work with SDSU and help them as a safety net for those students that may need some services that we can help and provide. You know, there's a lot of nonprofits. Father Joe's is wonderful. There's a lot of nonprofits out there. And the truth is we should probably work more together. And if there's one good thing in this whole COVID mess is that we're working more together. You know, it's not whose kid is it, whose youth is it, who has to go in HMIS. Let's just help them together. We work with Travelers Aid. Most people don't know this, but a young person under 25 can go one time free through a bus pass anywhere in the United States to a safe place. So we've placed a lot of kids through Travelers Aid. We work with California Conservation Corps. Again, a great place for these young people who really aren't college bound. It's more vocational training. They go to culinary school, firefighting. So there's opportunities for young people, but they need a lot of help to get there. And that's what we hope to do. Is our program is music and art, but truthfully, it's a safe place where they gain trust, and from there they seek social services. We have a tremendous case manager, like most case managers, overworked and underpaid, but they are so valuable. And I think Kate, you said, or Mike said that I was so wonderful to be promoted to program director. That's not it. When you're a nonprofit, you volunteer, they'll have you program director in 10 minutes. but I do have a heart for these kids, and truthfully, they are our future. And just as dear and special as Nyla is, each and every one of them are, and we just need to help them. So thank you.
Thank you so much for being here with us tonight, Joanne. That was great. So we've been having some excellent questions pouring in through our Google Doc, and I'm going to share the link again if any of you would like to add questions that you've been thinking about that you'd like our speakers to consider. And Mike, I think you were going to pull a couple questions. We have about 15 minutes or so for our Q&A period, and I think you were going to pull a couple questions just to kick things off.
Yeah, and it looks like Nyla's not with us anymore, so it's just going to be.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Yes, I am.
Oh, you're there. Yay. Okay, good, good. So there's a question here, and Joanne, you were just talking about it. Maybe we can talk a little more about the building of trust and the idea of whether it's through street medicine or whether it's through the Doors of Change program. What strategies you have to build that trust amongst those that you're interacting with, experiencing homelessness, and Nyla, perhaps you could comment on what your experiences were in terms of, I don't know, social services or agencies trying to provide some assistance and the best ways they could to build that trust up with you. So
would you like me
to
start? Is that okay?
Sure.
Mike, that's a great question, and truthfully, it's a key to any service and its success of the service. And I think that, I often look and see, why is our program so successful? And I think part of it, and maybe most of it, is we really accept the youth that walk in where they're at, not where we think they should be, but where they're at. And I think oftentimes people try to introduce social services or encourage them to go back to school or encourage them to get off the street, and they feel judged and they feel like they fail you if they don't make those choices right up front. So I think we have handpicked volunteers. Our staffs have all been there for 6-8 years. It's the same people, which also builds trust that we care enough about them to show up every Sunday and Thursday. But I think really, Mike, is that we don't have judgment. They come in smelly, with their dogs, high. They come in high, but they're well-mannered and there's rules, but we don't judge them. And I think that that's where they can kind of take a breath and go, okay. And then it grows. What do you think, Nyla?
I think you said it perfectly, Joanne. I think from my experience, like the people who I've talked to personally, they definitely said that, where it was like, no, I don't feel like this person understood me. This person just kept saying what I should do and not meeting me where I'm at. And that was one of the big things when I was working for the Youth Action Board, was that we need to meet youth where they're at, not telling them where they should be. Because just like any other person in the world, everyone else's life journey and path is different. Not everyone goes to college and stuff like that. And it's the same thing with homeless youth too. Not everyone has the same life story, has the same background. And like I said in the beginning of my story, like a lot of people's stories are different. It's going to look different. So I think you said it all correct, Joanne.
Serena, how do you address that in terms of the outreach with the street medicine?
I think it is being consistent and coming back and not judging and accepting people exactly where they're at and what do you need? What is it that you want today? Instead of, again, what you should have, or you need to do this and stop using. And, you just have to start a friendship and a relationship.
I'm wondering, do you ever feel an added level of, I don't know, anxiousness, because you might notice that there is a certain medical condition that might need more immediate sort of to be addressed. But if you haven't built up that trust, you obviously can't force someone to address it. I mean, so is that something you deal with or not?
Yes, you can say, you really need to go to the hospital for this. I mean, I can't really do anything, but they're not going. So, well, what can I provide now? I can at least get you some antibiotics so we can clean you up, but give you some other things. And then we come back and then if this happens, you go to the ER, here's a bus pass. They may sell the bus pass, but they had one. And, you know, and then you just keep coming back and checking up on them. I'm going to come back Monday here and look for you. So they feel worthy.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. I think that theme of persistence is one I think that we should all think really, really seriously about. I think the next question that has a lot of asterisks is about COVID. And it's kind of like, I guess, Serena, for you, the question would be, have you been surprised that there hasn't been more COVID cases amongst those experiencing homelessness? And then for Joanne and Nyla, maybe even to talk more about how COVID has changed your work and how it may change your work in the future, and how you're planning to move forward.
I'll go first. I don't feel unsafe. I have my PPE, and you know, as healthcare workers, we always wash our hands, and we turn when people are going to sneeze or cough. They're very polite to us, and God bless it, it's kind of a top-down infection since then a bottom-up, and that has saved them. And we put them in these shelters. We spaced them out as fast as we could in San Diego, and I think that was a big deal. I mean, it made big difference.
Thank you. Joanne, Nyla, do you have any thoughts on this?
Sure. I think that the biggest effect of COVID, I mean, there's been the good and the bad. The good is that we, as I mentioned earlier, that we've been not forced, but we've sort of had a pivot. So we're working with more agencies more directly than we ever have in the past. And that's been wonderful because, you know, as a team, you can help more people. So that's been a plus for sure. We work with interfaith. I mean, we work with a half a dozen in a really serious way, referring young people to each other. Even the convention center, we've gone down and I've met with Alpha Project, and if there's a young person, they'll refer us. The bad news is maybe more personal. I'm Italian, I'm a hugger. So I'm having a really hard time. It's really hard for me because these kids, you know, I always, as we mentioned before, you want to approach them on the side and you respect their space and their home. And I always ask before I hug, but those hugs, boy, they mean so much. And I've been doing outreach, and most recently I was out with a couple of the nurses, and we came across this young girl who, she suffers from PTSD, and she didn't want anybody touching her for the longest time. And for some reason, she and I had this moment where she's asked for hugs. So I saw her at outreach and she wanted to hug me, and I just couldn't. I have restricted lung disease, and I just hated not hugging her. And but we eye contact, and so that's been the hardest part, because the truth is also with outreach, it's a very intimate approach. I mean, I sit on the curb with them. I put my arm around them. You talk quietly. Sometimes you can't hear them because they're stoned or they're, you know, so it really has affected the outreach in a way that's less personal, and that's hard for me, but we do what we need to do to be safe.
Yeah, thank you for that. That really resonates. Nyla, what about you?
So for me, I am now working with Just in Time for Foster Youth, and like Joanne said, a lot of people who age out of the system are still experiencing homelessness, and they might be on and off the streets and stuff. I've actually been talking to a lot of our participants who actually have kids who are trying to get into school. You know, they have dreams, they have goals, they have ambition, and they just keep talking about, like, I can't afford my rent. It's either my rent or my daycare. It's either my rent or my car insurance. So it's devastating to me to see our participants who are constantly in this battle that they didn't ask for, and they're just trying to survive. So, you know, and it also sucks because of COVID, there's so many limited resources. There is a coordinator who is trying to help our participants get connected with vouchers, housing vouchers and stuff like that with San Diego Housing Commission. And it's very limited that we can't house everyone. We don't have enough vouchers for everyone. And So that's what's been going on with my organization, and what we've been doing moving forward is just how can we get more partnerships and connections to help participants get connected with more housing resources and so on. But again, it's very limited. So it's just a work in progress at this point.
Great. I think we have time for one more question. And in the spirit of having such an interdisciplinary group of panelists here who are doing such wonderful work, and this question has to do about if you were to go back to college, and Nyla, you don't have to come back right away, it's okay. But like what courses or experiences would you want to do in college that would prepare you for the work you're doing now? So just thinking kind of where you're at now and the current work you're doing, is there certain classes or experiences that you would have done in college? Yeah, Nyla.
Okay, so I'm very biased. I'm actually a psychology major from USD. And I probably, even though I loved psychology, I learned so much about mental disorders, about a lot of biological levels of, trauma and our experiences and how our body basically keeps a score of a lot of things. I think that I would have wanted to do a lot more with ethnic studies, a lot more with like learning more in depth of like change making and student leadership stuff. So even though I did learn a lot of from psychology, I wish that I could have expanded my stuff with all the other things that I could have done.
Thank you, Nyla. Joanne?
I think that I was a psych major and social work major myself, and that's also of course very helpful for understanding of the mental psyche. But I think what was probably most helpful, and what I would encourage most young people to do, is to volunteer. I volunteered for Special Olympics way back, and I was a little nervous, being around Special Olympics and not knowing anything about this group of athletes. And my God, are they amazing people. And I think that helped me to learn that you just see them for who they are, not their handicap. And I think that young people, we all get so caught up in our academics, but to volunteer with Special Olympics or to work with the elderly is so helpful. I think to just find that heart that we all have, and I think that's what I would suggest.
Thank you. That's amazing. Serena?
I think I would like to have more public speaking and in that venue. We had great leadership classes, which I think I could have had more out of it or got more out of it than they could do more of that. Starting projects, but also doing more missions and volunteer work. I was very fortunate to go on 2 missions, but if I could have won every semester, that would have been awesome.
Wow. Well, thank you. I'm gonna turn it over to Dr. Kate DeConnick to sort of do our final traditional thank yous. And so go ahead, Kate.
Yeah, well, I think as I've been sitting here just listening to the comments today and our presenters and the Q&A, I've just been realizing this is probably the first in a long line of different events that we might be having with the School of Nursing and other groups kind of coming together. There's so much that's ripe for kind of conversation here, and I've learned new things hearing from our speakers. I'm sure our audience members feel the same. So thank you to Serena, Joanne, and Nyla, and all of our co-sponsors who took the time to organize this event, and our audience members who spent their time with us tonight.